Hey Shakers, we're here with Dan Tyre from Hubspot. Dan, thanks for joining the Handshakin video series.
I got to start with a fist bump and then...
Yeah!
How about that, man? I broke
That's great,
my thing
that's
just
great.
for you.
Cool, thank you, Dan. So to start off, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to be one of the first team members of HubSpot.
Happy to do it. So my name is Dan Tyre. I've got about a 30-year business career, although I know I feel like your grandfather when I say that. I'm employee number 6 at HubSpot, which is actually my 5th startup. And I've worked for HubSpot for the last 8 years, and it's been totally cool. I graduated college in 1980. Were you even alive in 1980? Exactly. That's what I thought. All right. And in 1980, I was a bass player for a heavy metal rock and roll band. Right, and that was a blast, but it didn't pay a whole lot of dough. So I decided to work for a small computer company in Boston, Massachusetts called the Computer Store. And I worked for them for about a year. It was really interesting. The way you sold computers in 1982 is like you went into a retail store. It was like Best Buy, right? And you paid $12,000 or $15,000 for a IBM PC or IBM XT or IBM AT. $12,000 to $18,000. It's kind of a big thing. And then my boss jumped to a startup by the name of Businessland. And Businessland had about $30 million worth of revenue at the time. But the reason we define it as a startup is because I was one of the first 3 employees in the Boston area. And Murray Dennis and Alan McMillan and I started that organization. And over the next 9 years, we grew it to $1.5 billion.
Wow.
Right?
Nice.
And so that was when $1 billion really meant something. And it was a blast, right? We grew sales organizations, we managed inventory, and I got addicted to hypergrowth. And I worked in LA, San Francisco, I worked in Boston, I worked in New York. And the whole idea was to help customers acquire computers, local area networks, printers in a way in which it would help their productivity. And in 1991, I left Businessland and started my own startup, my first real startup, 2 people in my dining room. I called it Automated Labor Incorporated. Yeah, that's the worst name ever in the history of American business. In fact, later, I had seen that on a slide of the worst named businesses in the Boston area.
No.
I know. People say, are you a robotics company? Are you a temporary firm? So I shortened it to ALI Technologies. And ALI Technologies went from 2 people in my dining room to about $4.5 million in 3 years. Hypergrowth. And then we combined companies with a Phoenix-based company called InfoImage. Combined companies were $15 million, and we scaled it to $25 million, 12 locations across the United States, 250 employees.
250.
It was a great culture.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun. It was built around collaboration technologies like internet technologies and Lotus Notes. And then I bought the training division of InfoImage, and unfortunately it was right around September 11th, and the training business went into the can. So we had to put that company into receivership. But it taught me a lot. My 3rd startup went bankrupt. Taught me a lot about dealing with people and getting over the fear of failure, and it was very instructional in my development. And then I went to work for a company called Groove Networks. And Groove was run by this guy, Ray Ozzie. And Ray Ozzie had invented Lotus Notes, so I had known him a little bit from my background. And I managed a territory from LA to Arkansas. And Groove grew and was $40 million, and Groove got bought out by Microsoft.
Wow.
So I was looking for something to do. I worked for Microsoft for a year. That was totally fun. And the vice president of sales at was to become HubSpot. Brian Halligan said, no, I want you to start HubSpot with me. He goes, you got great energy, you've got a lot of startup experience. I go, Brian, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. He goes, it's just a detail. It's 2007. We can work remotely. We'll figure it out. And in fact, he was right. And so I joined right after Mark Roberge, Mike Volpe, Dharmesh Shah, Brian, and Patrick Fitzsimmons was there. And it was a blast, right? The early days of inbound marketing was fun and exciting and brand new, and I was learning new skills about how to sell over the phone. And I essentially was a cold caller, and then we started to get inbound leads because we started creating this content, and the whole inbound revolution took off. So HubSpot has just been a blast to work with because over the last 8 years, we've gone from just 10 people to 900 people, right?
Wow.
From no revenue to 100 million, $120 million, right? Publicly traded company. And the thing that I'm most I value at HubSpot is just super people with a super mission, right? What we want to do is change the world by not spamming people anymore and not cold calling them, but to make sure that you're helping people, right? You're publishing content, you're assisting them in solving their problems, right? And we do that for our 15,000 customers, and then we do that for everybody who needs that help.
Wow, great. So let's dive in a little bit to how to topic number one on how community helped you with your startup, and then let's talk about HubSpot as well. You know, many of our past guests have sometimes had to shift their personal networks and surround themselves with like-minded individuals in the same boat as them. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit with your startup, and then also with your role here in HubSpot?
Yeah, so HubSpot's always been about the entrepreneurial community because we started as a startup, right? We started at 1 Broadway, the Cambridge Incubation Center, right? And there were, just a handful of guys, and that kind of vibe, that type of energy was always critically important to growth of business. And in the early days, we skewed towards small business and entrepreneurs because the big companies, the American Expresses, the Honeywells, they didn't really want to change, right? And the smaller companies wanted to leverage their experience and knowledge to generate leads, right? They didn't have $2 million to drop on a Super Bowl ad. So what they wanted to do is make sure that they could get their experience, their knowledge to help people. And in exchange for that, they would get the inbound leads. So we always enjoyed working with smaller customers. And then as HubSpot grew, we realized that it had a profound impact on an entrepreneur's life, right? Because many times these are people who are like coding an application or providing a consulting service. And they were really good at delivery. They weren't so good at the sales process because they weren't trained salespeople. So if you give somebody an inbound lead, right, that they can leverage, that they're picking up and talking to somebody who already is interested in their stuff, then it becomes much easier. So the entrepreneurial kind of component of HubSpot really shone through. So we've always hung around with entrepreneurs. They've always been a part of our ecosystem. And then Dharmesh Shah is the founder of an entrepreneur blog called On Startups. So Dharmesh wasn't working hard on HubSpot, he was filling and publishing all this content, right? And so people would just like naturally gravitate to that. Now in 2007, startups weren't like they are today, right? This is the greatest time ever to do a startup.
Yes, it is.
Ever. Right? When I did my first startup, I raised $400,000. $240,000 of it went to buy computers and to Microsoft to pay for like email. Right? And now you could do that for like $40, right? You could do everything software as a service, so the barrier of entry is very, very low. And so these communities, like both you and I were in Fort Collins, right, in Colorado, right? And there's like tons of these startups here, and all these people are very interested in providing customer satisfaction, providing value, right? And those type of people are much different than the people who go to work for like a bigger company.
Yes.
Right? Those people want to see if they can make an impact for their customers, for their families, for their own life, and see if they can scale their companies. So that kind of energy relates very, very nicely to inbound. And now what you're seeing is all of these areas kind of grow and develop, that these entrepreneurs are coming together, right? Where there's these meetups and there's these weeks. There was one in Phoenix called Phoenix Startup Week, and there was Fort Collins Startup Week. Chris Snook did a great job, and John Cottrell in Phoenix. And everywhere I go, there are competitions, there are meetups, there are organizations that are housing these startups. So there is just tons of this collaboration, right? And that's very, very positive because not all startups make it. Right? But the experience that you get by working with a startup is very, very valuable. And the people that you meet and the ideas that you get. And it's been fairly well documented that people who have done multiple startups usually gain that experience and apply it to their next gig so they can learn from that and keep moving. So those kind of entrepreneurial kind of enclaves are very, very important to the next wave, right? It's the greatest time ever to start a business, right? It's less expensive and very exciting to find an idea and see if you can monetize it, right? And the entrepreneurial philosophy is even if your first startup doesn't work, right? Even if you can't monetize it, you're still gaining experience, and it's still a valuable endeavor that you can bring to your next step.
Yeah. All right, Shakers, we got to drop a knowledge bomb on you guys before we conclude topic number 1. Listen to Dan when he says today is the time to launch your business. And just to add to Dan's point, Business Insider says that by 2020, 40% of the American workforce is not going to have traditional jobs. Buy a used iPhone for $50, download some apps, use some SaaS companies, and launch your business for $100 today. There is not a better time. And then to
All right, but hold on, roll it back a little there, Handshakin Holmes. Here's the deal, right? You don't want to go off half-cocked, right? And there's a difference between pulling together a 3-page business plan where you're going to put a forecast of what you expect to do and buying a $50 iPhone and rock and roll. And I love the enthusiasm, right? And that's kind of what you did, right? You jumped right out there and said, I'm all in, this is what I want to do. And my heart swells with pride. That's a very, it's very exciting kind of time. But for most people, what I would ask them to do is think about why they want to work for themselves and why they want to go into business.
Yes.
Right? And I would ask them to kind of align their personal and professional goals so they're not going off half-cocked. The best business and business plans I've seen are businesses that scale not necessarily exactly the way the business plan was, and I don't need 40 pages, I need 3 pages. So this is the idea, this is the business, or the business problem that we solve, or the personal problem we solve. This is the team that we have, and this is what we think how we can monetize it so that we grow.
And why?
Because when you have that, you have a playbook. Right? If you go off the deep end and you're just like going to do everything, you get pulled in all these different directions.
And no, I mean, and you have to know your why, is what I mean.
Oh, you always have to know your why. So first of all, when you're setting your goals, there's 2 types of goals. There's why goals, why you want to do something, why you want to start your company. If you want to start your company because you want a side job, that's one thing. If you want to start your company so you can have financial establishment for your family so that you can grow and scale, so you have security, that's much different. And so those 2 kind of scenarios are at the far end of the spectrum, and they provide a kind of a different approach. Once you know why you want to do something, now you've got to figure out exactly what you need to do, right? And that's the key. Having a plan and then working the plan. And then, of course, changing the plan if need to. But I'm always a big believer in starting with a plan.
Yeah. All right, Shakers, so there it is. Don't get too carried away. Listen to Dan. You need to know your why. You need a plan. It does require some thought. Don't run around shaking hands without knowing who you're shaking them with.
Well, that's already been done. You're already Handshakin Holmes. There can't be a Handshakin Hansen or anything like that. They'd be a wannabe.
So, and then let's go ahead and conclude everything Dan had to say about community, Shakers. You know, like Dan said, a decade ago, or even half a decade ago, there weren't as many entrepreneurial communities. And all you have to do is just listen to Dan touch on the several different communities that helped him find answers to his questions and helped him find support when he needed it, and just quality information from an entrepreneurial community. Is that right, Dan?
You're exactly right. If you're not surrounded by entrepreneurs, you're not looking very hard. Because in every city, there's incubators, there's accelerators, there's programs like the Digital Summit, there's programs like Startup Week. All of them are designed for people who are in various stages of the startup process, right? When we were in Fort Collins, right, we saw people on the stage who had started as a startup and scaled all the way to multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
Right? The CEO of Otterbox, that lady from New Belgium, what was her name? Patty Jordan. Patty Jordan.
Employee-owned.
Employee-owned. She advocated employee-owned ownership for New Belgium. That Tyre beer, which I'm very happy they named after me, but that's kind of another video. And they talked eloquently about the struggles that they've gone through. All of those, even if you're thinking about a startup or involved in a startup or you're beyond the startup stage to a scale-up stage, all of that information is very, very valuable because you can feed off other people's energy. You can learn off other people's mistakes, right? What you're trying to do with these video series is you're trying to help people avoid the potholes, right? And to a certain extent, they got to go through them themselves so they really learn. But to another extent, if you can surround yourself with people who are trying to do the same thing, you can see them fall into the potholes, and maybe that will make it a little bit easier or a little bit better for you. So those kind of competitions, those communities, those startup weeks, very valuable to participate in some fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and move along to topic number 2, Dan. It's surely there were points in your career when you needed to meet with someone who just would never email you back. Probably not today, but let's rewind a little bit, and maybe you could walk us through some of those experiences and how you combated those.
Yeah, so first of all, anybody in the United States can get to virtually anybody else in the United States if they use their noggin, right? The thing is, I can't talk with Mark Cuban, or I can't talk to Dan Tyre, or not that I'm in Mark Cuban's league or anything like that, but it's just basically wrong. What you can't do is send a spam email without any research and expect somebody who's super busy, who's super smart to respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't take any initiative. It doesn't show any creativity, right? But if you want to get in front of Bill Gates, you can figure out a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't have to be a stalker. You got to understand what's important to Bill. You got to
Mm-hmm.
understand how and where he invests his time and effort. You've got to understand the 6 degrees of separation
Mm-hmm.
of who you know and how you know. And then you have to understand why Bill would want to talk to you, right? And he's all interested in ending malaria and disease. So if you could offer some value for things that are important to him and his family, then you can always find a way, right? The key is to be not pushy, right? The key is to do your research or prep. The key is to have a creative opening, right? The key is to spend a very little amount of time, because these guys are super busy. And the key is, if he says, no, I'm not really that interested, then you got to respect that, and you can move beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the stages are, understand who you want to talk with and understand why,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could talk with Dan Tyre, but I don't really want to chat with you for 20 minutes unless there's something there, right? Actually, if we're at a barbecue or your next door neighbor, or I'm at a mixer somewhere, I'm happy to talk with you.
Personal relationships, they might play into it.
Very, very important, right? And then you and I are on the same schedule, so you have my cell phone. You can call me anytime. I prefer that you book me in advance, only because I'm super busy. I'm pulled in all of these different directions. And if you want me to noodle on something, you have to say, Dan, this is what I'm looking to talk about. This is the value that you can bring. You just have to make it easy for me to help you, right? In 95% of the cases, right? People at HubSpot, people in my entrepreneur community, people in Arizona, they're happy to help if you make it easy for them to coordinate, to communicate, and if there's not a whole lot of heavy lifting.
That's great. I'm going to steal that for our book.
Go
Is
for
that
it.
okay?
Of
I'll
course.
put the Dan Tyre there.
I like that.
Handshaking your way to entrepreneurial success. There's some great advice from Dan on reaching people that you don't think will email you back, Shakers.
So we got proof, right? There's folks at HubSpot. I've corresponded with Mark Cuban when I was at Groove, and he was the nicest guy. He's emailing me back saying, I don't think it's a good fit for the Mavs, but thanks so much. And same thing with somebody from HubSpot. Send him an email, and he's going, oh, yeah, I'm vaguely aware of it. Send him back, right? How hard is that? That was very well-crafted email. It was explained information that was very helpful to him. It was short, so he could read it on his laptop or iPhone, and boom, right? Who's not going to respond to something like that? The final thing is, if you really want to get to somebody, right, and sometimes they're traveling, sometimes they're backed up. Right now I got like 300 emails, so I'm the ability to call an email, then call an email like 3 or 4 days later, and in the subject line put second message, just so people know that you're trying to get. If somebody calls me twice, emails me twice, you'll always get a response. It may be, I'm too busy, I can't talk to you in October, but you'll always get a response from me.
Very nice, very nice. So, so let's go ahead and move on to topic 3.
Boom.
So, Dan, when there's mentors that you work with either closely or not, and you know they have more information that can lead to your success in your career, how do you build a relationship from them professionally and kind of try to pull it in a little bit more closely to your personal?
All right, here's the Dan Tyre mentorship rant, right? Have you ever heard this before?
I don't think I've heard this
so
yet.
Mentorship is very, very important to me. It's important to me because in 1993, this guy by the name of Steve Levy was chairman of a corporation, BBN, who had actually invented the ARPANET that led to the internet on a federal contracting kind of thing. And Steve's very, very smart guy. He's a very business-oriented guy. And he essentially reached out and said, what you need is a board of directors for your company, and you need a mentor, and I'm going to fill that role. I go, well, how much is it going to cost? He goes, oh, it's not going to cost you anything. In fact, people on the board of directors are going to invest in your company. The only thing I want you to do is when you're established and famous, I want you to do that to other people. And I don't want you to charge them, and I took that vow very seriously. He
Awesome.
was instrumental to the growth of my company. He's still a good friend. He is a super smart guy. And he started me on the mentorship kind of kick. Now, at HubSpot, I've hired hundreds of millennials over the last couple of years, right, in the BDR program and the IMS program, in the international division. And I always tell people to establish a personal board of directors, right? When you're figuring out what you want to do over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, get 3 people, right, that aren't related, right, because you're always little Matt to your mama, right? 3 people that you can establish a business relationship with and tell them what you'd like to do is buy them lunch 4 times a year, right? And that you're going to set it up, you're going to pick them up at wherever they want to go, you'll pay for the lunch, and what you want to do is you want to build a foundation of trust, so when life throws you curveballs or you have difficult questions or you're in a tight spot, you're building the relationship so those 3 people can give you advice. Right? And after you've done it for 30 years, you start seeing the same kind of questions over and over. I did one on the way from the airport today. A guy that I met in San Diego, he said, you sound like a good entrepreneur. I'm having this kind of issue with some of my founders. What should I do? Right? And he did exactly what you're just talking about. He found my email. He emailed me. He booked me for 30 minutes. He sent me the information in advance. And in 30 minutes, I was able to understand what he wanted and give him a little advice that hopefully will be very effective. When you have 3 personal boards of directors, right? 4 is too many because you're listening to too many. 2 is not enough because sometimes it ends in a tie. 3, that means it's 12 lunches a year, so it doesn't break the bank. And they're going to get to know you. They're going to get to know your strengths and weaknesses. And as you grow your business and grow personally, they should have a pretty good idea of how to advise you in a way that you can accomplish your goals.
Great advice, Shakers. Let's go ahead and conclude our last topic. One great example to build relationships with world-class mentors is tell them you want to take them out to lunch 4 times a year.
I like that.
Simple, straightforward to do.
And tell them all I want to do is I want to pick your brain, right? I value your input. I know that you're a leader in the community, and I need a little help, right? And some people will ask, well, will you pay me? And the answer is no, right? Entrepreneurs or mentors, sometimes it's a paid position, but I find that sometimes skews the advice that you get. And the only thing, if you get good mentors, the only thing we want to do is spread the word. We want more people to go out and mentor more people because passing the torch, sharing that information, help people making a better decision, strengthens the community, strengthens the environment, and it's better for everybody. I mentor probably 25 folks. We follow this whole same process. I get so much more back from the mentor position down to the mentee than I give to the folks. It's just off the charts great.
That's awesome. Pay it forward culture.
Exactly.
# startup life, Shakers. So Dan, let's hear one action item that the Shakers can take immediately after watching this video. Will help them with personal relationships in their entrepreneurial journey.
Yes. So the one thing is get your personal board of directors. You reach out to 3 people. Shouldn't be related. Right? They should be people that can augment your weaknesses. So if you're a finance guy, right, get somebody who may be a little bit more effusive or sales oriented. If you're a sales and marketing guy, get somebody who's a little bit more detailed and factual. Right? If you're a tech guy, get somebody who augments your natural strengths. Right? You surround yourself with people who are the same type of people. That's more like a frat party or church or something like that. What you want is surround yourself with people who are slightly different, who will view the problems you have from a different perspective. But it is amazing when you build that relationship, when you ask them to help you solve 3. I'm a big believer in 3, right? Don't ask them to solve 14 problems. They don't have time for it. And it shows that you haven't prioritized. You send them the 3 problems before lunch. You take them out. And then every year you assess whether the relationship is working. If it is, boom, you keep going. And if it's not, get new mentors.
Boom, there it is. So a couple questions we're starting to throw at the end of our interviews, Dan, to kind of bring more of a personal light to you.
Go.
Okay? First, what's your phone wallpaper?
My phone wallpaper, Jerusalem. It's the Holy Dome at the Mount. And it's beautiful because it has the temple in the background, it has the Wailing Wall, and right in the corner you can see the church.
Did you take the picture?
I did. Yeah,
Nice.
I've traveled extensively through the Middle East, and it was an extraordinary time and a very moving thing. And where sometimes people who haven't been there don't really get the vibe of Jerusalem. But when you live in Jerusalem, you live there because you're a devout person that wants to honor God. And people don't care if you're a Muslim or Jew or Catholic or Christian. They just care that you're a person of the book and they want to honor that. And it is extraordinary. The energy that you hear. They say it's like a vortex. All of the energy. Right. Well, you may have seen it when the Jews go to the Wailing Wall. They start vibrating. Right. They go back and forth. That kind of energy is extraordinary.
What kind of car do you drive, Dan?
I drive a 1998 Honda CR-V that has 128,000 miles on it. Right. And I'm sticking with it. My view of cars is it's transportation. Right, my wife is saying maybe it's time for a Tesla, which is good for the environment, and I'm a huge Elon Musk fan. But I've got a 17-year-old driver in the house who is relatively new to driving, and although Sally is a great driver and drives much better than I do, it's unlikely I'm going to change vehicles until she goes to college. Although I should say I'm the worst driver in the world. I'm a terrible role model. I'm a great role model for a mentor. I'm a terrible role model for driving. I drive the way I talk, right? I've gotten 13 driving tickets or speeding tickets in the last 12 years, right? The only thing that keeps me out of jail is in Arizona you can take the class. I'm on the first name basis with this guy Gabe who teaches the safe driving class, and he just shakes his head when I walk in. And I just was in Mexico this last weekend. I got pulled over for speeding in Mexico, right? It's a travesty.
No fun, no fun.
It's just I like to do things very, very quickly. Sometimes I think, sometimes I just move forward, and driving is one of those things. So could you imagine if I had a Tesla? I'd have 40 speeding tickets. I'd be in jail right now. The Honda CR-V is the only thing that's keeping me out of jail right now.
Drive a CR-V then, Shakers.
Yes,
Don't end up in jail. It'll stop you from doing your startup.
Yes.
Last question. You're speaking here in a few hours, Dan, right?
Yes,
What are you speaking about?
Welcome to the Inbound Revolution. 30, 40 times a year, I get on a stage here and talk about the 8 years that I've been blessed to be able to go out and talk with people about the change in buying behavior, right? And this is a great event. We love the Digital Summit. And Denver's a great city. Why is everybody so happy in Colorado?
Just because it's Colorado.
I know. They told me no pot jokes, and it can't be the football teams, right, or the sports team. But everybody is always so happy, right? It's tremendous. And so it'll be a great crowd, and looking forward to having a good time.
Great. And for those of us who don't know, what is the Digital Summit?
Paige and the team run... I think there are 5 or 6, maybe 8 of these sessions all over the United States, and it talks about how to apply your authenticity and special sauce in your marketing on a digital format so that you can grow your business, right? And it's really good speakers, and it's really fun, and mostly the people who are here already get it, and what they're looking for is strategies so that they can scale.
Any networking?
There's a lot of handshaking. Okay, in my case, it's a fist pumping. In my case, I'm going to actually shake your hand because your handshake's numb. It's the first handshake that I've done in maybe, I don't know, I'm saying 3 or 4 years, except in the pharmaceutical industry. In the pharmaceutical industry, if you go in for the fist pump, right, they think you're going to punch them. They're like, their eyes get big. They're like, oh. But most everybody else, they're cool with the fist pump.
Cool. And lastly, Shakers, before we go, Dan, if we want to find you on the internet, where can we find you?
Dan Tyre, LinkedIn, executive of Hubspot, Scottsdale, Arizona. @Dan Tyre is my Twitter handle. Dan Tyre1 on Instagram. And I think it's Dan Tyre on Google+. Right? So I embrace all forms of social media, right? You're as good as your network. I got a huge network. I love my network. Right, and happy to help any way that I can. Right, we take this stuff very, very seriously. In my capacity as working with HubSpot, in my capacity as an investor and a mentor and a member of a board of advisors or a board of directors. Right, the growth of American business is one of the best places that I can spend my time and effort. And it's just a tremendous honor and privilege to be able to work with companies that are growing and companies that are learning the process, and companies that are providing all this value to create jobs, to create a better life cycle or lifestyle, and to create a better world.
Reach out, Shakers.
Oh, man.